So Megyn Kelly, formerly of Fox, formerly of all, she had reactions. So there was a New York Times article recently that showed increasing support for traditional gender roles among both Republican men and Republican women. So, in the views of the Electorate Research Survey, the percentage of Republican men who agree that women should return to their traditional roles increased from 28%. The graphics are fantastic for those of you on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
All right. We've got a guy with an axe, and like the wife is there in a medieval dress with her sourdough. Yeah, it's great. So it's skyrocketed. The men say they want trad wives from 28% in 2022 all the way to 48% November 2024. And the women also had an increase in a desire for more traditional roles. Megyn Kelly saw the graph. Yeah, Josh is all thumbs up. Megyn Kelly was all thumbs down. She had a reaction. Let's just play a little bit of that there.
Sounds good.
And I talk to young conservative women all the time about their lives and their goals and, you know, the things that they want. And what's happening is they can't find men who are maybe more conservative. Usually they're looking for somebody who is religious, you know, like a lot of conservative women tend to be God-loving conservatives. And they can't find a lot of young men who want to marry a working woman now. And this is an actual problem that's coming up on the right. And to me, it's so sad because it's like, how did we get to the point where we're now telling young, conservative, amazing women that they're not attractive if they also work, if they choose to, let's say, do what I'm doing and what you're doing and like get their voice out there. But I'll stick with me just because I think conservatives listening to this will like the thought of another Megyn Kelly voice up and coming. Okay. Well, why wouldn't we want that? Why would we take somebody who's talented in this field and really wants to make a difference and have the messaging to her be, you're really not that valuable unless you give it up and go into the home and only have a family and only raise a family. And not only are we sending her that message, but young men are actually believing that.
So
who's making this argument?
I am like, Megyn, I don't see any evidence that this is actually what people mean. But are there like influencers that you can find on Instagram where the women are like, we're all 100% home? Absolutely. That is there. But in terms of wider societal trends, my dear friend Ivana Greco has an article in the Institute for Family Studies that I think is much more balanced than Megyn's take here, which Megyn, like, does the world want more Megyn Kellys? I don't know. Maybe. Sure. Like one or two we could fit. But can every single woman do that? And does every woman want to do that? Not that either. So Ivana, who wrote a chapter on family policy for us in For God, Country, and Sanity, our awesome Catholic vote book, she argues that understanding traditional gender roles to be equivalent with mom never earns a dime is ahistorical, but more to the point, it's also unlikely to be reflective of the way that conservatives are actually thinking about this issue, Megyn. So is the demand that women all go back into the home and never earn another cent and do no work outside of the kitchen the way that Megyn seems to be describing it? I really don't think that that's accurate. And so I would really urge you to think about this more as what Brad Wilcox calls neo-traditionalism, where the bulk of the child rearing, especially in the early years, goes to the wife, for sure, for obvious biological reasons, but that most conservative families have some kind of admixture where the mom is doing a little bit of contributing to family income, working outside the home, even in terms of volunteer work and helping to build the parish or to build the schools, the classical schools that children are going to. Women are doing that kind of work. There is absolutely a lot of work going outside the home, even for women who aren't in the workforce per se. But in conservative circles, women are in the workforce. So I just don't see evidence that what Megyn's doing here, which is casting this sort of, this is what conservative men are saying, and conservative women who want to work can't find husbands. I'm not sure the evidence is there for that.
There's some of that. But again, I just feel like, I don't know. I mean, I agree with someone in the chat. It feels like Megyn Kelly maybe feels a little defensive about some of the choices that she did make, and now she's past the childbearing ages probably. I mean, born in 1970. So
she's like 60, right? It's like 55 or something.
55.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I just feel like when it comes to this kind of stuff, it would be helpful to have conversations that are like pragmatic and not so ideological. So there are some people like, I'm never going to let my wife work a day in her life. It's like, okay, it's not. I agree with what Ivana Greco said. It's not really historically accurate necessarily. Obviously, there's some cost savings made when she's in the home because you're able to make your own food. You're not going to DoorDash all the time. There's cost savings. Also, my father-in-law would talk about the fact that he would talk to people, realize, because they used to have a daycare, his wife did, in the early 80s. And he'd say, you realize if you pay us this much to watch your kids, and then you go into the workforce and the wages you're making right now, you're paying half your money in taxes, essentially. Why are you doing this? You're not really getting ahead. And it's because they wanted that kind of to work because just they considered motherhood a drudgery. And I guess that's tough. But I feel like we should not be so ideological. I mean, Catholic Boat, most of the people who work here at Catholic Boat are pretty traditional minded, of course. But that doesn't mean that we're like, oh, so only men work here? Obviously, Erica.
Not to out us. I think we have more women that work for Catholic Boat than men.
Yeah. And a lot of whom are mothers.
Yeah. And again, we have the option where people can work remote, and there's different, positions where, just the nature of the work is a little bit more siloed so that moms could do it from working from home. We have people that do that, like writers and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So we want to make it so that people can help supplement their family income and not try to go to a regular, 9-to-5 job or they're in a cubicle. They want to be a part of their kids' lives and have a little bit of income for that. I said to my own daughters as well, I said, look, there's just been so much that has been shown and come forward with women as they get into their late 30s and early 40s that they wish that they had had more children. They wish they'd had more opportunities. I think because there's so many more opportunities for working from home and that kind of stuff, there's an opportunity for you to try to think this through and be open to the possibility where you could take a break and work in the workforce. My own wife worked as a nurse, and then she was able to stop and dedicate it to raising the children. And then when she was done, she could go back into nursing. Now she runs the bookstore here, the Catholic bookstore. So there's opportunities to kind of, provide for the family, in a way where you're not completely disruptive. But I do feel like, again, we got to get a little bit of the ideology out of this. And for most of the ideology for the last 50 years has been feminism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
feminism talks about women should be able to make these choices. And so some women are like, oh, I want to stay home and raise a family. And then the cat ladies just go after them. What's the deal with that?
I think that the fundamental thing here, and this goes back to, do Americans want manufacturing jobs and that kind of drudgery, quote unquote? Do women want to be in the home with that drudgery with the diapers and all that? I think the issue is that we've lost sight as a culture, sometimes both on the right, but predominantly with feminism on the left, that what is labor for? What is this quote unquote drudgery for? Why do we work by the sweat of our brow? It's for the sake of our children and for the sake of building a family. And so I think that the woman's labor force participation or lack thereof, or other ways of working to contribute to society, all of it should be calibrated on what is in service of my marriage and my children. And then comes every other consideration, but not just for the woman, right?
Yes.
That's over down father. Fathers also work for the sake of their children. They work for the sake of their family first. And for both sexes to reorient and to see their careers and their jobs and all of that in light of the good of their children and the good of their wives or their husbands, that is the reorientation that has to happen. And that, frankly, the sexual revolution smashed for both sexes.
Yeah. I think
there's a really good
sexual revolution.
There was a really... Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think people get a little bit too narrow with this conversation, especially if you were to take a step back and look historically, working in an industrialized world is actually kind of a new phenomenon for most of humanity. And so the idea that okay, the husband's going to wear a suit and go into the job, that kind of started in the 60s because of industrialization. But before that, you had people that lived in towns and villages in a much more communal way.
Right.
And the work wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go get a paycheck from a boss. It was, I got to go till the fields. You know, I got to go be a cobbler or whatever, like whatever.
I mean, I think
the
it goes
family
way
trade
back
was.
in the 1960s, like maybe the 1860s, but
Yeah, like you could
definitely
go-
that industrialization was a break in the
Industrialized,
way we work.
it changed that. It changed the way we live in community. Even if you look at European towns, like the walkability and the community aspect of all of that, like look at America with the roads and the highways and all that. Like all of these things actually play a factor into this. All that to say, the added social pressure of like, and I don't think anyone, maybe some people do this on purpose or whatever, but like they make women feel bad for one way or the other, whether or not that's like they stay home or they go to work. And I don't think anyone's making that decision. Maybe some people are. Most people are not making that decision as like an FU or like, I'm going to live this way, even though I know it's not, whatever. Most of the time it's out of necessity. Like you have to do it because the economy, your family situation, whatever. I think that the ping that most women feel is actually natural and legitimate of wanting to be home to raise their children. And people that fight against that, I think, oh my gosh, think about how many mind-altering drugs have been offered to the modern woman in terms of getting on birth control since you're 14 to take care of your acne. Like what that does to you, what you get attracted to, how your hormones are, like how you live your life, like guilt-free sex, right? Like just acting however you want. Like that's the metropolitan idea of happiness. That is very radical and different than, you know, hundreds and thousands of years before that would just not be how it worked. And for good reason.
But you touched on something I want to expand on. I think is very important because the transition from an agrarian to an industrial economy does make a big impact. I mean, like you go back 100 years ago and you have a hardware store where the husband runs the store, but then his kids are helping out, you know, and that kind of stuff. And so there's opportunities for the family to be actually economically beneficial to the bottom line. Okay. Then you transition to, like you say, the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, where dad goes off, drives in the car for 20 minutes to go to some other town and work a 9-to-5 job. A really good holy priest out of Michigan, Father Joe Krupp, he's Joe Went Black on Twitter. He talked about this. He got into this debate, and I thought he had a really good thing to say. He said, men came home from World War II completely traumatized.
Right.
Culture had no room for understanding or way to deal with that, so men just simply went to work, focused on their families, and had a huge number of children. It was one of the first generations attempting to deal with the reality of transitioning from this agrarian culture to an urban culture. In an agrarian culture, you have children because they help. And then the death rate among children was also very high, he said. In the urban culture, children cost more money than you make from them. And they also, and you know, they tend to live long. You tend to live longer and they live longer. So the church needs to understand this a little bit better and grapple with this. Like, you know, and everyone, you know, and so is Erica and, you know, your family have embraced the culture of life ethic that John Paul talks about. But it's like, it is true. It's not like my kids are like helping me, grow crops and that's lowering the grocery bill. They're all economically, you know, unfortunately on the ledger, they're deficits, you know, and I love them. Okay, so it doesn't matter. But like, this is the kind of
it's a trade deficit. You get a tariff on your
we
kid.
live in a car-based society, so that like, you know, that's like one of the things that you look at the fertility rate, and one of the things that drives, you know, has a major effect on the fertility rate is the fact that we have car seats now. Right. And you look at the back row and you're like, I can't fit 3 car seats in this, you know, and
got to get a bigger van.
Can we afford a minivan, or we just stay at 2 kids, you know? So these are the things that we, you know, drive all this kind of stuff, and having 2 kids and then maybe going back into the workforce because that wasn't too much of a break. All these things we have to have these discussions with. I think it would behoove us as Catholics to not bring rigid ideology into it. We should try to encourage women to consider the possibility of, like, you know what, there's more to life than just being a worker drone. Like, why do you want to live in a cubicle for most of your life? There's so much, you know, motherhood is enriching, and try to encourage it and sell this grander vision. I think that's great. But we should also, you know, have enough humility to understand that not everyone's economic situation is the same, and not to just like think, oh, you must be a, you know, feminist like Gloria Steinem, blah blah blah. You know, like,
no, I'm writing down here too. Like, I actually think most of this, Eric, I think brought this up, but prioritizing the family is actually kind of a radical decision to make in modern society. Like, if I just think about modern society of all the pressures forcing us to stuff, it's like modernize school for your children. So you got to get the best grade, best ACT school, tutors, activities, sports. Like that's a full-time job in itself. For the man, make as much money as possible, workaholic, go crazy. Then we got the girl boss thing going on right now. Like you got to go be your person, girl boss, that type of thing. Hyper consumption, like even think like kids with iPads or
going to Disney.
Exactly right. Like buy as much as possible, have both cars, European vacations,
music lessons, sports leagues.
Oh my gosh, just like roll it up. Yeah. And at the end of the day, like if these are left unchecked, it actually is just, it's dissolving the family. It's not like the trad wave conversation is like a small part of, I think, many different forces all pointing at the same thing to tear apart your family, and all for the guise of this is somehow an end good. And it actually, I think, relates in a lot of ways to the economy we talked about earlier. But like, I think all studies are showing like married religious are the happiest groups of people on the planet. It's not even close. Married religious. If we think marriage and family are a good, necessary for the flourishing of individuals, but then also by proxy, the community, by proxy, the country, these are really things you need to sit down and consider, and finding a partner that is on the same page with that, which Megyn Kelly kind of oddly brought up, of like, women working are not attractive. I think most people now meet their wife when they're working. Like everyone works in some way. So like using that as the bar for whether or not someone's attractive is bizarre. I don't know if anyone I've talked to has ever said that. Like, oh, my wife was working.
Yeah, there's 300 million people in this country. There's going to be lots of experiences out there, of course. But
but most of them work because this is the modern world we live in which, like, before in the agrarian or whatever, women worked in different capacities. Now everyone works. Like
part of it too is that social media, it's easy to try to find, like the lightning rod thing. And so like there has been, we've been now in like the 4th or 5th decade now of, the girl boss, like women working and never even questioning the wisdom of it. Like, and for traditional minded people who say, you know what, it's better for the mom to stay home and have kids. And, and instead of saying it like that, like, let's just have the summer dress and the sourdough and, all this kind of stuff. And it just, it makes the feminists who are like 65 years old explode. And so part of it is this social media thing.
Hey, if you like that clip, you definitely like the full show. We tackle the biggest headlines in news, culture, and politics live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Hit that subscribe button now, and we'll see you then. Thanks for supporting the show.